On October 15th, 2019, history was made in the skies over Nigeria. For the first time in the 55-year history of the Nigerian Air Force, a woman earned her wings as a combat helicopter pilot. Her name was Tolulope Arotile, and she was just 23 years old. In less than 3 years of active service, she would fly 460 hours of combat missions against one of Africa's deadliest terrorist groups. She would become a national hero, and tragically, at just 24 years old, her life would end in a way that shocked an entire nation. This is the story of Flying Officer Tolulope Oluwatoyin Sarah Arotile, a pioneer, a warrior, and inspiration to millions. Tolulope Arotile was born on December 13, 1995 in Kaduna State, northern Nigeria. Her father, Akintunde Arotile, was from Ife in Kogi State, and from the very beginning, Tolulope grew up immersed in military life. She attended Air Force Primary School in Kaduna from 2000 to 2005, followed by Air Force Secondary School from 2005 to 2011. Growing up surrounded by military personnel, aircraft, and the discipline of the armed forces, it's no wonder that young Tolulope developed a fascination with flying. But this wasn't just a childhood fantasy that would fade with time. This was a calling. In her own words, Tolulope once said,
"I joined the military simply out of passion for it. Being a military personnel has been a long-term ambition. The courage and what they stand for is simply exceptional."
September 22, 2012, at just 16 years old, Tolulope took the first major step towards her dream. She was admitted into the prestigious Nigerian Defense Academy in Kaduna as a member of the 64 regular course. For 5 years, she trained rigorously, studying mathematics while undergoing intensive military training. She learned discipline, leadership, and the skills necessary to become an officer in the Nigerian Armed Forces. On September 16, 2017, Tolulope Arotile was commissioned as a pilot officer in the Nigerian Air Force, graduating with a Bachelor of Science degree in mathematics. She was now an officially part of Africa's most formidable Air Force. But becoming an officer was just the beginning. Tolulope had her sights set much higher. Literally, she wanted to fly. To become a pilot in the Nigerian Air Force is an achievement in itself. To become a combat helicopter pilot, that's in a league of its own. Tolulope was sent to South Africa for her initial flying training at the Starlight International Training Academy. There, she learned the fundamentals of aviation, earning her commercial pilot license while mastering the art of flight. But Tolulope wasn't interested in commercial flying. She wanted combat training. She was then sent to Italy for tactical flying training on the Augusta 109 power attack helicopter, a sophisticated combat aircraft used for reconnaissance escorts and armed support missions. This wasn't just flying. This was learning to operate a weapon systems while maneuvering through hostile territory. This was learning to make split-second decisions that could mean the difference between life and death, not just for herself, but for the troops on the ground depending on her. And on October 15, 2019, standing before her superiors and peers, Tolulope Arotile was officially winged as Nigeria's first ever female combat helicopter pilot in a military force that had existed for 55 years. In a country with a population of over 200 million people, Tolulope Arotile was the first woman to ever break through this barrier. She didn't just make history for Nigeria, she made history for the entire African continent. But for Tolulope, this wasn't about breaking records or making headlines. This was about serving her country, and very soon, she will be called into action. While Tolulope was making history, Nigeria was fighting a war. Since 2009, the terrorist group Boko Haram had been waging an insurgency in the northeastern Nigeria. Thousands of people had been killed, millions displaced, and the entire communities destroyed. The Nigerian military was engaged in a desperate struggle to protect civilians and restore peace to the region. Tolulope Arotile wasn't content to watch from the sidelines. As a combat helicopter pilot, she flew dangerous missions over hostile territory. She provided aerial reconnaissance, identifying terrorist positions. She flew escort missions, protecting ground troops, and when necessary, she engaged enemy targets directly. In just 2 years of active service, Tolulope accumulated 460 hours of helicopter flight time, an outstanding performance for any combat pilot, let alone one so young and newly qualified. She flew missions as part of Operation Gamma Ike in Niger State, combating armed bandits who were terrorizing rural communities. She was described by her commanders as effective, deadly, and fearless. President Muhammadu Buhari himself paid tribute to her skills and bravery, recognizing her as one of Nigeria's most valuable assets in the fight against terrorism. Imagine being 24 years old and carrying that kind of responsibility. Imagine knowing that people's lives depend on your courage, your skills, and your judgment. Imagine being a pioneer in your field while simultaneously fighting one of the world's most dangerous terrorist organizations. That was Tolulope Arotile's reality, and she embraced it with everything she had. But on July 14, 2020, everything changed. July 14, 2020 started as an ordinary day at the Nigerian Air Force base in Kaduna. At approximately 10:55 that morning, Tolulope received a phone call from her colleague, Flying Officer Perry Karimo, asking her to come to the base to discuss their return to Enugu, where they were stationed. Tolulope drove to the base, arriving safely and parking her vehicle. As she walked through the base, she encountered 3 young men she hadn't seen in years, former classmates from her time at Air Force Secondary School, Nehemiah Adejo, Igbekele Folorunsho, and Festus Bayegun. According to the Air Force preliminary investigation, the former classmates were excited to see Tolulope. In their enthusiasm, one of them, Nehemiah Adejo, was reversing his vehicle when the unthinkable happened. The vehicle struck Flying Officer Arotile from behind with significant force. She was knocked to the ground, striking her head violently against the pavement. She was immediately rushed to the 461 Nigerian Air Force Hospital, where medical personnel fought to save her life, but the head injuries were too severe. The bleeding was too extensive. At 4:45 p.m. on July 14, 2020, Flying Officer Tolulope Arotile was pronounced dead. Nigeria's first female combat helicopter pilot, a young woman who had survived combat missions against terrorists, who had defied expectation and broken barriers, was killed in a traffic accident at her home base, and she was just 24 years old. The news sent shockwaves across Nigeria and beyond. How could this happen? How could someone who flew dangerous missions over hostile territory die in such an ordinary accident? Questions immediately arose, and not everyone was satisfied with the answers. The Nigerian Air Force moved quickly to investigate Tolulope's death. Their preliminary findings painted a picture of a tragic accident caused by overeager excitement and lack of caution. According to their report, the 3 former classmates underwent toxicology tests at the Air Force Hospital. No traces of alcohol or psychotropic substances were found in their systems. They were completely sober. However, investigators discovered that Nehemiah Adejo, the driver of the vehicle, did not have a valid driver's license at the time of the accident. The Air Force concluded that Tolulope's death resulted from blunt force trauma to the head and was purely accidental. They dismissed allegation of foul play, stating it would be absurd to suggest anyone would intentionally harm one of their most prized assets. But Tolulope's family wasn't convinced. Her elder sister, Mrs. Damilola Adegboye, publicly stated that the family had not come to terms with the explanation that Tolulope was killed by a reversing classmate. They called for a more thorough investigation, questioning how an ordinary reversing vehicle could cause such catastrophic injuries. Their skepticism resonated with many Nigerians who found the circumstances suspicious. Social media erupted with conspiracy theories and demand for justice. On July 24, 2020, 10 days after Tolulope's death, the Nigerian Air Force handed the case over to the Nigerian police as a civil matter. The 3 suspects were transferred for further investigation and potential prosecution. To this day, questions remain. But what cannot be questioned is the impact Tolulope Arotile made during her brief time on this earth. On July 23, 2020, flying officer Tolulope Arotile was laid to rest at the military cemetery in Abuja with full military honors. Senior military officials, government dignitaries, and thousands of Nigerians gathered to pay their respect to a fallen hero. But death could not diminish her impact. In the years since her passing, the Nigerian Air Force has honored Tolulope's memory in multiple ways. They renamed pilot quarters at the Air Force Base in Abuja as a flying officer Tolulope Arotile's pilot quarters. The auditorium at Air Force Secondary School in Kaduna now bears her name, and the pilot crew room at Nigeria's Home of Combat Helicopters was dedicated to her memory. But perhaps the greatest tribute to Tolulope's legacy is this. Following her death, at least 12 female officers, inspired by her example, enrolled in flying training to become Nigerian Air Force pilots. Young women across Nigeria who might have never considered a military career now see it as possible. Little girls who dream of flying now have a hero who looks like them. Tolulope Arotile proved that gender is no barrier to excellence. She proved that Nigerian women can serve at the highest levels of their nation's defense. She proved that courage isn't about size or strength, it's about art and determination. In just 24 years, she accomplished what many never do in a lifetime. She broke barriers that stood for over a century. She served her country in its darkest hour. She inspired a generation. And though her life was cut tragically short, her legacy continues to soar through the Nigerian skies, carried forward by every woman who dares to dream of flying. Flying Officer Tolulope Oluwatoyin Sarah Arotile, born December 13, 1995, died July 14, 2020. Nigerian first female combat helicopter pilot, a pioneer, a warrior, and a hero. Our story reminds us that true impact isn't measured in the years or in the lives we touch, the barriers we break, and the paths we create for those who follow. Tolulope's path led her to the skies, and though she is no longer with us, every time a young Nigerian woman looks up at a military helicopter and thinks, "I could do that," Tolulope Arotile is still flying. Rest in peace, flying officer. Your mission continues.